Hi, good morning, all parents and students. So, welcome to this morning's webinar session on the PSLE prep for 2026. More focus in terms of general strategies that we'll look at for this year. As you all would know, this is actually the start of a series of PSLE prep webinars that we are doing for all students. There will be subsequently subject-specific webinars focusing on the different subjects. So today's webinar itself wouldn't be as done a deep dive into each of the subject itself, but where we are coming from is more in terms of the overall landscape, the key study strategies, exam techniques, and so on that you can bear in mind, including things like, be it in terms of the goals that you are setting, in terms of how to develop a study plan as we work towards the exams. These will be the things that we'll focus more on today. Then subsequently in the subject specific webinars, there will be more specific deep dives into each of the subjects know-hows as well. Okay, so just to clarify on that, and just to introduce myself, I'm Weilun, right? So I'm the academic director here at MyStretcher. And for those of you who may not be MyStretcher students, so MyStretcher actually is a learning center in Singapore catering for education services across pre-primary, primary, and secondary. And we have helped many students, right, in terms of working with them for preparation for be it milestone exams like PSLE and so on as well, right? So one of the key things that we wanted to highlight, right? So as we go into the new year, because if you look at it now, this is the very last stretch of the holiday, right? And as we go into the new year, I think for many parents here, especially if it's your first time guiding a child on the PSLE, it can be quite a stressful journey, right? It can be quite a new experience as well. I mean, all of us have taken the PSLE before, but what you should realize is that actually the PSLE itself has changed pretty much over the years, be it in terms of the requirements, be it in terms of the exam format, and so forth. Even in terms of the difficulty level, I would say. So here we will also want to highlight, what are some of these key things that have changed over the years, and be it in terms of the selection, posting to secondary school, and also in terms of the exam requirements, and that also means for the students, right? And I think also for all the students here, right? So maybe as a show of hand, I think you all can just raise your virtual hand as well. So how many of you are going into P6 next year, or actually in 2026, like you all can raise your hand. Okay, how many of you are going to P6? Yeah, in 2026, you can raise your hand just to see the crowd. Because I know sometimes there are also people who are just going to P5, but you just want to get an early heads up on things. Okay? Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, so but are there any like P5 students? That means you are just going to P5 next year and you just want to get an early heads up to understand more about the PSLE and everything. Oh, okay. That's quite a small group of you also, right? So it's always good to get an early heads up, right? So thanks for that, right? So understandably, right? So most of us here today will be going into primary six, right, in 2026. And so what we will do today, so I will share my screen now, is that we will focus on a few key areas, right? Okay, so let me share screen. Okay, so you all should be able to see my screen now. Okay, so what we will be looking at today really is four main key areas, right? And the first part here is just to introduce everybody. I think all of you, given that you all have done your primary five, year-end exams, it would have been based on the AL scoring system. But just as a refresher for all parents as well, who may be newer to this system, just a recap, right? In terms of what is this AL scoring system, what is the implications for secondary school selection. Thereafter, we'll go through a bit on the PSLE preparation, study timelines. Third, looking at some of the key practical issues and challenges that students tend to face, right, as they prepare for the PSLE. And then finally, looking at study revision strategies, both in terms of how do we, as we go into the new year, right, how do we think about setting the right goals? How do we think about developing a study plan and also having effective study strategies that you can actually explore, right, for the new year. Okay, so these are some of the things that we would touch on today, right? And the very first part, right, so is I want to just provide a recap to everybody, right, for those of you who, may have just seen it for the first time as you go into primary five, and you may need some time to attune to that about the AL scoring system and what's the implications for secondary school posting, right? And over here, the key things to note is that, unlike our time, right? So for the parents here, and for myself also, you will realize that actually during our time, we were on the T-score system. So T-score system, actually, if you look at it, there were many more students with different scores, right? So what does that mean? So what it means is upon a score of 300, there can be somebody who got an overall PSLE score of 270. There can be somebody who got an overall score of 269, 268, 254, 253. So you can see the number of possibilities are a lot more, right? So there are a lot more students with different scores, right, who will show up and apply to different schools. But right now, with the AL scoring system, so some of you, I mean, you all would be familiar, right? You all would know about the AL scoring system, but just to let you all know what's the implications of it. And the reason why I want to highlight that upfront is because many years, every year, in fact, we work with students for the secondary one posting exercise, and you will realize actually there is a very key implication, right, as we look at the new AL scoring system. And what you can see over here is that under the new AL scoring system, how that works is you can see for each subject, if you look at this table on the left, you will have a raw marks that you get. So for example, let's say for science, right, upon 100, maybe you got like 80 marks. So if you got 80 marks, then you are in the AL score range of 3, AL3. If you got 75, then you're in AL4. So that would be what we call as your AL score, right? Your achievement level score, right? So that is a score that's assigned for each of your subject based on your raw marks. So your overall PSLE score is then a combination of these different subjects combined together. So say for instance, somebody who got AL2 across English, Math, Science, and Mother Tongue, their overall PSLE score would then be a score of 8, right? And using that score of 8, that's where they would then so-called compete with other students to try to get into the schools that they want to get into for secondary schools. And as you can recognize, right, so the lower the overall PSLE score, the more higher the chance of the student getting into a school that they want, right? Because the lower the score, that means the better the child's performance, right? So that's how we look at it. But you can see the implication here is essentially because of this new system, what has happened is that students are less finely differentiated, right? And what do I mean by that? That means last time, if you look at it, like between, like say, 230 to 2440, right? If you look at it in terms of a T score, there's like many different possible marks that the student can get, correct? 230, 231, 232, 233. But now you can see it's all compressed together, right? So it's all compressed together. And in fact, what you can see over here is that there is only that full range of score if you look at it. If we just calculate mathematically, right? The lowest you can go is 4. The highest you can go is 32, right? And if you look at it that way, actually everybody is packed within this range, right? So there is, in terms of the number of possibilities of scores, is much lower already compared to in the past. And what does that mean? What that means is that as you apply to schools, there's a lot higher chance that, if let's say you got an AL score of 14, right, applying to a school, the chance of another student having 14 and also applying is quite high. There are going to be many students with the same PSLE score as you, simply put, right, compared to in the past. So in the past, let's say maybe you got 232, there may not be as many students with 232. But now, if you got PSLE score 14, many students is also going to show up with PSLE score 14, right? They will have the same score. And what it also means is that you see, as you then apply to schools, right? The schools will not also be looking at your raw score. In case some of you are wondering, I think that's a question that comes up sometimes. Do schools know your raw score, and then how do they differentiate? So the reality is that let's say you and another student show up with a score of PSLE 14, the school is not going to know what is your underlying raw score. They will just see that, okay, this is 14 and this is 14. So you may then ask me, right, but teacher, so how do they choose, right? So given that both have 14, how do they choose? And the reality now is that then you can see there are more cases whereby there's so-called a tiebreaker that comes in, right? So what does tiebreaker mean? Tiebreaker means that, two students, they have the same score, and they both want to go into this school, right? And I only have one place left in the school, for example. So how do I know who to give it to, right? So the way for me to determine who to give the place to will be through a tiebreaker, right? And the reality now is you will realize, right? So the very important implication that I want to highlight to all parents and students also is that your choice order of schools matter a lot more. So the irony now is that in PSLE posting, I mean, of course, the score is the first and foremost priority, right? It's always by merit. by your score that is the most important. But aside from that, one thing that you all need to already recognize is that the way you order your schools, the way you put your schools in a choice order is going to matter a lot more now compared to in the past. And the reason why is because the choice order is one of the key tiebreakers, right? So that means uh, we can think of it as usually there are three main tiebreakers, right? So let's say two students have the same score. The first tiebreaker is citizenship. So that means if both students are Singaporeans, right, they have the same chance of entering, right? There's no tiebreaker between them. But let's say if there's a student who is a Singaporean versus a student who is a perm resident, the Singaporean will actually get first dibs in entering, right? Assuming the both of them have the same PSLE score. Okay? So that's the first tiebreaker. But assuming both are Singaporeans, so there's no tie, that they are tied, they are still tied there, right? So their scores are tied, they are both score 14, they are both Singaporeans. So the next thing that the school will then look at is the choice order. Choice order. So that means if you had put the school as number one, first choice out of six choices, compared to somebody who put the school as three or four, you will be the one to get into the school, right? You will be the one to get into the school. So that is something that you all need to. I want to put it up very upfront. Why? Because a lot of people don't recognize that, right? Because it was not something that was very important in the past, but you will realize now actually it has become a lot more strategically important. Just simply how you order the school. That means even in terms of the school that you most want, that should be your top choice for you to maximize your chance of getting in. So that was something that we realized as we work with students over the years. They don't really recognize that. And then they kind of lose the opportunity of getting into the schools, right? So that's one very key implication that already shows up as you look at this new AL scoring system, right? The next thing I want to show you all in terms of this AL scoring system is a few other things also, which is, and later on I'll touch a bit more on that. So the AL scoring system itself, you will see, is also very telling in that it's very interesting if you look at it and you kind of use it as a way to map the progress of the child, right? And the way I will characterize it is it's a bit like climbing like a mountain like that, right? It's a bit like climbing uh, Mount Everest in that sense. And what do I mean by that is as you look up the range, right? So if you look at it from AL8 to AL7 to AL6 to 4, 3, 2, and 1, you will see that generally the upper ranges are a lot narrower. What do I mean by that is you see within this range, right? The range of scores within there is narrower compared to those at the back. So the implication of that is this actually, and I liken it to climbing a mountain. So what it means is that if we are at the low, or rather the higher AL score ranges, that means you are at AL8, AL7, trying to climb up is pretty manageable. That means just by putting in that foundational effort, you can actually make a lot of progress. It's actually quite possible for you to jump from like a 8 to a 4, or if you are somebody who is like from a 4 to go to a 3, is also possible, or from a 6 to a 4, right? These are actually things that are pretty manageable. It's like climbing a mountain where you're at the base and you're trying to climb up, right? It's pretty okay. But the problem is once you reach that, like Mount Everest, right? The top part, there's like a death zone, right? Before you reach the top of the mountain, there's this death zone, right? And it's only a very short part of the mountain. You see, you're like that last few kilometers to the top of the mountain. But it's super difficult, and many people fail there because the oxygen there is lower, the environment is a lot harsher, right? You got a lot less energy, right? So even though it's only a very small stretch, it takes a lot more to get to the top. And it's the same with the AL score also. So the idea is that once you reach like the 3 or the 2 level, it takes more effort for you to go up to a 1 as compared to say if you are at a 6 and you're trying to go to a 4, right? So that's the other thing to bear in mind. And why do I want to highlight that upfront is because for many of you here who, let's say from your P5 scores is, let's say maybe you didn't do as well as you expected, then you had something like a 6. So don't be discouraged by that because if you are at a 6, I would say there's a lot of room for you to do all the low-hanging fruits just for you to make good improvement. So the reality is this. The reality is if you are at a 6, it probably means that there is still some foundational problems that you have. And I will bring out some examples later. And if you just correct those foundational issues, that means you just solve for those low-hanging fruits. It's actually pretty easy for you to make good improvement, for you to jump like a 1, 2 score level up. That means from 6 to a 4 and so on. So always remember that, right? So don't be discouraged based on your P5 results. In fact, I would say, the higher your AL score, the more room for you to quickly improve actually, right? As compared to, let's say then if I at the 1, 2, and 3, it's a lot more difficult. Why? Because 1, 2, and 3, and it's not to say also, so don't go away thinking also it's difficult, that means don't need to improve. That's not what I mean. So what I mean here is that if I at 1, 2, and 3, the way for you to improve, for you to get your better AL score, it will be a bit different. So I would say if you are like the AL 1, 2, and 3, let's say now your category is AL 1, 2, and 3, it probably means that your foundation is there already, right? So for each of the subject. So it's not really that you have a foundation issue or a fundamental concept issue. But the problem now is more likely your exam technique, more likely the kind of non-routine or stretch questions in the exam. For example, you all know for mathematics, there are these what we call as non-routine questions in the exams, right? Yeah. Science, you have those application-based questions, higher order thinking questions. These are the ones then you have to do more of. That means I will tell you that actually later on I also talk more about that. But if you are in the 1 to 3 range, yeah, less about drilling, just basic drilling really. But it's really more about going through trending questions practice, making sure you understand what are the different common question types that often come out in the PSLE. And how you do that, the best way to do that is looking at the 3-year series, looking at the prelim papers to make sure that you're familiar with that. The trick to doing an exam well, right? Guys, if you look at it this way, right, is that you do not go in blind, right? So I thought I want to highlight that upfront as well. In that many a time, a lot of students feel that okay, they are quite smart. So it's okay, right? I'm quite strong in this subject. So I'm just going to go into the exam and I'm just going to wing it, right? That means I just try everything, crack everything from scratch. The reality is that the very best students who do really well for the exams, I can tell you chances are when they do the paper, they will have seen at least 75% of the paper before already. So that's the psychology that you all need to have actually. The reality is that why do students really do so well? Are they really a lot smarter compared to the other students? The reality is not really that also, right? The reality is that they are more well prepared, right? And why? Because I would say almost three-quarter of the papers, because they have prepared. They have gone through trending questions, they have gone through past year prelim papers, 3-year series, and all that. They have seen those before. So once they have seen those questions before, when they do it, right, it's like muscle memory, right? It's like some of you here, you all play badminton, play basketball, right? Why do you all get so good at it over time, right? It's because the more you throw the ball into the hoop, the better you get at that, correct? And it's the same with the exam also, right? So it's the same with the exam because you realize uh, once you are able to look at this here, you can actually see that yeah, so guys, I'm still on this slide. I have not moved yet. Yeah, I have not moved on yet. Okay, so once you are still training in terms of your muscle memory and everything, and you are getting better at that, then you will realize that actually it helps you, right, a lot more, right? And a lot of the students, the problem why they run out of time in the exam is because they see the questions for the first time, right? That means they have not done it before and they are looking at it for the first time. And once you are looking at something for the first time, you are thinking from scratch, and that wastes a lot of time. Okay, so I'll go through that a bit more later. Okay, so with that, so just coming back to the AL scoring system. So I've mentioned the two main implication, right? So number one, just a takeaway, I think you all should also note that down. Choice order matters, right? So school, of course, merit is the first and foremost, scores is the first and foremost. But remember, very strategically now, your choice order of schools is going to matter a lot more. And second, right, the AL scoring system is like a mountain range, right? Whereby is with that basic effort, you can actually make a lot more progress at the higher AL score levels. So definitely from there, depending on where you are right now, that should also guide you in terms of the effort that you need, and also in terms of the kind of questions, the kind of practice and drills that you need to go through as well. Okay. Yeah. So the other thing I just want to do a quick highlight here is I think for some of the parents here, you may be wondering as you are already, and also for the students as well, as you are doing some legwork with regards to secondary schools and looking at that, right? You may be wondering, how come now when I click on like the MOE website, there's this thing called G3, G2, G1. So I thought I would take the chance also to highlight with regards to that. because this was not something that was familiar for us, right, in the past. So what you will realize here is that actually, if you look at this particular system now, um, what has happened is the old normal academic, normal technical, express streams have ceased to exist already. So with effect from the cohort of the students 2 years ago, right, this this system, has ceased to exist. And you may wonder then, oh, that looks like quite a big change, correct? So the idea is that indeed there is quite a significant change now, right? And the whole consideration behind that is part of this new initiative by MOE called the subject-based banding initiative. So what they have done is that the equivalent of it, if you look at it for primary school, is you'll be aware in the past, right? We used to have this EM1, EM2, EM3 system, right? Whereby depending on your performance at primary four, you will be allocated to different bands, right, in primary five. And that will also affect in terms of the difficulty of the curriculum that you are doing. But EM1, EM2, EM3 have since been phased out and replaced with this structure, right, where we have standard subjects and foundation subjects. Foundation subjects are lower level in terms of the difficulty level compared to standard level, and students themselves have the freedom to choose, right, a mix of subjects depending on their ability level. Of course, I would say here, most students are going to be taking the standard level subjects, right? But foundation level subjects actually are subjects that people will take if they feel that they cannot really cope, right? So it's quite a similar system now at secondary school, whereby you will see here in place of normal acad, normal technical, and express, they are not going to be putting people in a bucket anymore, but rather what they'll do is that they will give you that flexibility to choose a range of subjects based on your ability and based on your preference. With what's G3, G2, and G1, right? G3, you can think of it G3, you can see a G3 here. G3 is the highest difficulty level. So let's say like for a subject, say like English, right? Let's say there's G1, G2, G3. G3 is the highest level difficulty. G2 is the intermediate one, and G1 is the lowest level difficulty. And broadly speaking, you can think of G3 is like the express level of the past, G2 is the normal academic level, and G1 is the normal technical level, right? But because now those streams have been removed, what happens is when a student goes in, right, they have that opportunity to actually have a mix of subjects over time. So what you see in secondary school now is in place of like, okay, you are express student, you are a normal academic student. What's going to happen is that now you have students who are taking mix of subjects. So it may be the case that, oh, this student is taking three G2 subjects, right? So maybe he's taking three G2 subjects, like in English, Chinese, and math. But his science, he feels he's very strong, right? He's really good at science, and he wants to take it at G3, and then he can take it, right, based on his demonstrated ability. So what happens is this guy will then take three G2, so English, math, and Chinese G2, and science G3. Right, so that's possible now. You see, in the past that was not possible. In the past, there's no such thing as, um, if you are like normal acad, you can take like a few normal acad subjects and then one express subject. It doesn't really quite work like that. But now it's possible, right? Under the new subject-based banding system. And the whole reason for that is, the consideration behind that is that MOE also doesn't want to typecast people, right? They don't want to be like the case that, oh, because of your performance like that, you are just in this bucket, and that will be the way throughout your secondary school. They want to give that flexibility in terms of having students being able to choose, right, to calibrate accordingly. And that's why now you have this so-called G3, G2, and G1 system. And what does this posting group mean? So some of you are asking about that, right? So the idea behind this posting group thing, I think some of you also asked a good question, which is why do they have to remove why do they have to remove um like this system, right? The whole normal acad, normal technical thing. Like I mentioned, so the idea behind that is that if you look at it in the past, right? If let's say you were like normal acad, normal technical, or express, you were kind of put in a bucket from very early on, right? And there was not much flexibility for you to adjust after that. That means more or less, if you are in normal academic, of course, there's a chance that let's say if you do really well, you can switch to express altogether, correct? I think a lot of you were aware of that. But apart from that, if you are not able to do that, chances are you are just stuck in normal academic, right? And all the way through, you'll be normal academic. And then at Sec 4, you will take, then after that, you will take the NA level exam or the NT level exam. And then after that, you'll be posted accordingly to like the poly or the ITE and so on, right? So what we do recognize is that they don't want to be putting people into a bucket, right, that early on without much flexibility. So what they have done is they have then removed that buckets but allow students that ability to then mix and adjust a bit more. But the reality is that you will see also now as we go into secondary school, if you are in G3, right, if you are going in, taking mainly G3 subjects, these bunch of students probably will be taking all G3 usually. Usually that will be how it works. There can be some rare cases where along the years, that means like in Sec 2 and all, they feel like they cannot really cope with a subject. They want to drop to G2. That is possible, right? But it's less common. Then there are also other students who, they go in with mainly G2, but like I said, because they have some demonstrated ability in some subject, like they feel that they are pretty strong at some levels, then they will take those at G3. So that one is quite common, right? So that means maybe they take three G2 and one G3. And this is something that would have been less common under the old system. Okay, yeah. And some of you are wondering now is what is this whole posting group thing about, right? So the posting group you can see is tied to your PSLE score. And if you have a PSLE score of between 4 to 20, you will go into a school via posting group 3. So the way to think about that is that what is this posting group? The posting group is a way to guide the initial subjects that the students can offer at the start of Sec 1. So if you are going into a school via posting group 3, the implication here is if you look at this column, most of the subjects that you are offering, if not all, actually most if not all of the subjects that you are offering will be at the G3 level. So that's the initial way to guide the kind of subjects that you will take at secondary school. Then if you are at posting group 2, you can see posting group 2 is then tied to the PSLE score also. So let's say if you are at 23 and 24, it may be that, MOE feels that, okay, in terms of you managing the adapting to secondary school and all, it may be better to go in via more of an intermediate level difficulty. That will be posting group 2. And what's the implication of that is that if you go in via posting group 2, most, if not all, of the subjects that you will take is at the G2 level. Okay, why we say most is remember what I said just now also, right? That if you have demonstrated ability in a certain subject, what do I mean by demonstrated ability? That means if you take a subject and you got a score of 5 or better, then you have the option to take that at G3. So this is the one that you see a lot of students when they enter through here, there may be a possibility that maybe a few of their subjects is at the G2 level and another subject is at G3 because they are more confident in that. So that can be what happens. Then posting group 1 is that means most of your subjects is at the G1 level, right? So that's how we look at it. So for those of you who feel that still looks very alien to you, I will say that the very simplistic way of looking at it is that posting group 3 is like your old express stream. Posting group 2 is like your old normal academic stream. And posting group 1 is like your old normal technical. That will be the easy way to think about it. But of course, the nuance, the further implication that I've already talked to you all about is it's not like that, right? It's not totally like that. Why? Because now there is that ability for students to mix and match a bit the difficulty level of the subjects based on their ability, based on their preference. Okay, so that's essentially how we look at this particular system. What's the implication here that you all can recognize? Is that you will realize here, right? Is that okay, a few great questions in the chat that I also answer. It is why is this so important is because not every school offers every single posting group. Okay, many schools will have posting group 1, 2, and 3. Many schools will have that, but there are going to be some schools, right, who only offer certain posting groups. Specifically, they only offer posting group 3. So you have to be very clear that if you are not eligible, that means if your PSLE score is not in that range. So let's say you are here, right? That means straight away you are not going to be eligible for certain schools, right? Because those schools do not offer posting group 2 and 1, right? So that is one thing that you all need to recognize, okay? And another thing that I can tell you all as a very quick tip also is that um, once you have, once you have looked at it in terms of a certain posting group, right? You cannot go in via other posting groups. That means once you have applied to schools via posting group 3, you are not going to be able to uh, apply to other posting groups like posting group 2, etc. Okay? Yeah, so that's the thing to take note. Okay, so there's a few questions in the chat now. So I'm going to just answer them because this is the first part here that I want to take a chance to highlight a bit. Okay, what does it mean about the PSLE score? Is it AL score? Yeah, so somebody asked, so what is PSLE score? Is it AL score? So just as a very common misconception, right? So guys, this is just semantics actually, but I thought maybe good to clarify. You always hear people use AL and PSLE score interchangeably, right? But to be very clear, AL score is the subject specific score. So usually when we say AL score, it means, okay, for English, I got AL score of 3. It's subject specific. What is PSLE score? PSLE score is when you combine all your subject specific AL score together, that is your PSLE score. Okay? So the very common error that a lot of people will make on is everybody will tell you, I got AL score of 21, but that is not AL score. AL score is subject specific. What they mean by that is the PSLE score. PSLE score is combining all your the different subjects AL score together. Okay, so that's the first clarification. The next clarification, right? So the implications of taking some subjects at G2 and the rest at G3. So some of you are asking now, right? And I think it's great to look ahead because what you all realize here now is that the reality is that the education system is a lot more interlinked. And actually, a lot of the choices that you make early on can actually affect down the road some of the choices that you make later. So some of you may even be wondering right now, right? But what's the problem if I take some G3 and some G2? So I can tell you all very factually is that it depends on where you all want to go after secondary school, right? So for the parents here, you all be familiar. So after secondary school, you can go to like JC, poly, or ITE as well, right? So the idea now is that if you are looking at the JC route specifically, uh, that also changed already. So for the parents, I think you all be aware about L1 R5, right? Now it has changed to L1 R4, right? So in your child's cohort, definitely it will be the L1 R4 system. 5 subjects that they will look at for calculation of the score for entering into JC. Why I brought that up is because those are entirely based on G3 subjects. G3. So you cannot count G2. That means if you the reality is that means if you didn't take enough G3 subjects to count towards L1 R4, you cannot go JC. Right? That is the very specific implication. So as y'all work through this process, right? That's what y'all need to realize lah. But like I said, right? So the very important thing to note is that nothing is cast in stone. That means the beauty of the SBB subject-based banding system when you go into secondary school is that it doesn't mean that just because you are in G2, you are G2 all the way, right? If you prove yourself, that means even in Sec 1 and Sec 2, if you do really well, there is that possibility for you to upgrade to a G3 level. So it's not like, because you went in as G2, you're stuck at G2 all the way. It's not that, right? So if you do well enough, and usually it's at the end of the Sec 1 exam, the Sec 2 exam, it's still possible for you to cross to a G3. Okay? Yeah, so that's the other questions. Yeah. Okay. So another question is if I score 5 and lower, then I'll be put into G1. Okay, so guys, just to check, be very clear. 5 or lower, right? 5 or lower, the lower your score, the better, guys. So if you can get a PSLE score of 5, that's really, really good already. Right? That's like crazy good, right? And that would be in posting group 3. Okay, posting group 3. So just to be very clear on that. So posting group 3 is like the express level of the pass. Okay. So if you have PSLE score of 5, somebody is asking about that. Remember, the lower your PSLE score, the better. Right? The higher, then the less options you will have available. Okay. Okay. Another question is with regards to 21 or 22, okay, which posting group do you recommend? Okay, so guys, this question, right, has always come up, and I know this is only one part of the focus for today, and I would like to go to the other parts on some of the preps and so on, but maybe just to handle this upfront, right, you all will see this in case you're wondering what is this about 21 and 22, 25, why is there this 2 or 3 or 1 or 2? It's because at these areas, MOE gives you the choice to choose. That means as the parent, as the student, they will tell you, okay, your child now is at 21 and 22. I'm going to let you choose, right? Do you want to go in via 2 or 3? And the implication is this, right? So if you go in via 2, the subjects that you're mainly taking will be at the G2 level. But if you're going in via 3, the subjects that you're taking is at the G3. So how we will always think about this and how we will advise is that you have to look at it from the perspective of a child actually, which is you have to ask yourself, right? So, based on the child's performance in the PSLE, right? Based on the child's performance in the PSLE, um, what resulted in the outcome, right? The 21 and 22 outcome. Was it in line with what you were thinking for the child? Like all along from P4, P5, and P6, this is more or less where the child is at. And you feel that there are some foundational deficit that the child may still need time to fix. If that's the case, then I think G2 will work a lot better because you also realize as they go into secondary school, there's a lot more adapting needed, right? It's a new environment, they need time to get used. So, going into a place that is comfortable for them, right, would work a lot better for them. And as I mentioned, it's not like you're stuck in G2 just because you go into G2 all the way. So I've seen a lot of my students, they can go in, so it's like, it's like they can, as they demonstrate their proficiency, right, it's actually possible that they can go up to a G3 level. That means as they become used to secondary school life, as they build their proficiency, as they demonstrate that in their Set 1 exams, it's actually possible for them to go up to G3. So that's one thing to take note. Okay. But if you're saying your child is not really like 21, 22, you feel like your child just maybe, had this mental block during the exam and he really got this score which you feel did not quite reflect his ability level, then you can opt for G3, right? So G3. So that's how I would think about it actually. Okay. So that's how we would think through that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I've answered regarding the posting group one. Okay. Who decide on G2 or G3 for each subject? It goes in via your posting group. So again, like what we mentioned here, essentially, if you are in posting group 3, right, the subject levels that you would usually be going in for will be at the G3 level. But posting group 2, then G2, and posting group 1 is G1. Okay? Okay. Yeah, so that's the thing to take note. Okay. Okay, so that's the key part to note. Okay, so let me just see, is there any other questions that I need to answer? Uh, okay, I think that's about it for now. Okay. One last thing on the posting group. So what exactly does the posting group do, right? The posting group itself, okay, essentially you can think of it this way, right? So the posting group itself has two main implications. Number one, the posting group affects the kind of secondary school that you can enter, right? That's the first implication because not all secondary schools will offer that particular posting group. So very specifically, I can give you an example. Some of the IP schools, some of the SAP schools, and so on, they wouldn't have posting group 1 and 2. They will only have posting group 3. That means if your child is in a PSLE score range that do not allow them to enter posting group 3, you see, for example, here, then they won't be able to enter those schools as well. So number one, posting groups determine the kind of secondary schools that can already offer, right? Number two, posting groups will guide the initial subjects that you will take. So to be very clear on that, so you can see over here, if you are in posting group 3, it will mean that as your child goes into the school via posting group 3, the subjects that he will take there, English, Math, Science, Chinese, it will be at the G3 level, which is the old express level, right? That means the highest difficulty level. Then if you are in posting group 2, that means you get into a school via posting group 2, then the subjects that you take will be at the G2, right? So G2 level, so that means it will be like the old normal academic level. Okay, so I know some of you may wonder, but teacher, if you look at this, then what's the difference? Is it like then a change in name, right? Because it seems like this one is still express, this one is still normal academic, this one is still normal technical. So the difference now is that there is some room to adjust. That means, if you go in, indeed, most, if not all of your subjects will be at G2 if you go in via posting group 2. But if you demonstrate some ability, a higher ability level in certain subjects, like maybe math, they will allow you to take math at G3. So it may be that you can take English, Chinese, Science at G2 and math at G3. Okay? So I hope that is clear. So that is how the posting groups work. Okay? Okay. So let's go on. Uh, the next part now. Okay, I want to then now touch on the next portion. Okay, so I've talked about the posting groups. Uh, yes, so if you score PSLE score 20 and below, all your subjects are automatically G3. Correct? You are going in via G3. Okay? Yeah. Okay, how hard is it to get AL1 for science and everything? Let's come to that now. Okay, so let's come to the next portion, which is with regards to the exam landscape. And here actually I wanted to take a chance to highlight a few things. As mentioned, the subject-specific PSLE webinars will be going into a deep dive on a different requirement. But what I want to use this chance to tease out is really a few key changes and implications just to take note. So number one, you all will realize actually, like for example, if you look at languages, a few key things to note is, um, as with last year actually, right? So in fact, you all will be the second batch. There has been some changes, right? For math and science, you will be the first batch, but for English, it has already happened. And one of the key things to highlight is there has been a bump up, a very specific note to note is the bump up in terms of the oral examination percentage. So in terms of the score, right? Oral examination as a percentage of your overall score, right, is now higher, right, compared to the past. And you realize that's a good thing actually, because what is the rationale behind that is it's really a way to recognize that, English as a language, there is importance in terms of the communication skills, right? It is important to be able to communicate well. And as part of that, that oral component therefore becomes more important. But why do I say it's a good thing? It's because oral itself is something that perhaps unlike other components, right? Be it like writing, language use, there's more of this, I would say like this iceberg that you have to go through. What is the iceberg? That means if you look at writing, right? Uh, there are more underlying things to fix, be it in terms of your grammar, be it in terms of your vocab. But you realize for oral, actually, there are certain frames, certain structures by which we can approach it. And here at MyStretcher, actually, we do provide our students with certain frameworks, like be it in terms of our peers framework and also in terms of our REAP framework for reading aloud that we actually use to help them to have a more structured way of tackling, be it the reading aloud or stimulus-based conversations. In fact, in the last year, we also had some digital tools that we introduced on reading aloud and on oral to really help students to improve on that. So that's something that we feel is, there is some muscle memory there, right, that can be drilled. And that's definitely one thing to take note that in terms of English, that higher focus, right, in terms of the oral component. Okay. The other key thing I want to highlight is also for mathematics. Some of the more significant changes that has happened is that you will realize for mathematics, as you're going in as the first year, a new cohort, new changes, right, is that there has been some tweaks, right? And one of the tweaks is that I would say generally put, paper one has gone up, right, in terms of the percentage, whereas paper two has gone down a bit. So what do I mean by that? Is because now you see it seems like both are 50-50, correct? Last time it wasn't like that. Last time it was paper one 45, paper two 55, right? But what has happened now is, and I think it's a good thing, because I feel that, and perhaps MOE also recognizes that, in the past, paper two was pretty overwhelming. So if you all look at it, paper two is this one here. Paper two is pretty overwhelming for some students. In fact, paper two is quite well known that, many students, I mean, it's possible to actually fail the long answer questions. In fact, it's not uncommon. Like even in some of the prelim papers, you see people failing this part. Why? Because the problem sums here are a lot harder. And also in terms of the questions answering technique, students suffer a lot more because if they don't know the problem solving strategy, like they don't know the heuristics, what we call as the heuristics, or they have not seen the question before, they may struggle and they may run out of time. So you will see actually a lot of times students for the last, like the 4 or 5 marks question, usually sometimes they leave it blank, either because they don't know how to do or they run out of time altogether. So you can see here what is the new changes here, right? Is that very specifically, you will see number one, in terms of the number of questions for long answers, it has come down, right? So it's more manageable now. It's chopped by two, right? They chop out two questions. And instead of 55 marks, now it's 50 marks, right? So the harder component has been dialed down a bit. But by comparison, you see last time the paper one, which is what we always call as the low-hanging fruit component in math, Last time it was 45, but now it has dialed up to 50, right? And what has happened? What are the key changes in paper one? You will see here there's more MCQ question. Last time they used to be only 15 MCQ, right? Now they are 18, right? And some of you who are very perceptive may see, oh, but teacher, you mean last MCQ can have 2 marks one? So in case some of you are not aware, yes, the math has MCQ questions that have 2 marks. And it's all or nothing. That means like even if you didn't show working, you got the correct answer, you get the 2 marks. Okay, why? Because it's just OAS shading, right? They are just going to grade you based on OAS shading for the MCQ portion. So it's really all or nothing, and it's 2 marks. And why is it 2 marks? Because it's a harder question, right? So there are more steps involved for you to get at the correct answer, right? And you can see now there are more, right? So instead of 5, now there are 8, and now it's 16 marks in total. So in total, you can see there's 26 marks worth that you can glean from MCQ. And then for the SAQ portion, something very interesting. So guys, one thing for you all to highlight also is you see last time there used to be this 1 mark question, right? But now there's no more, right? There's no more of the 1 mark question. Now it's all 2 marks, right? Instead of 1 mark question. So in short, what you all need to recognize is that, and especially for the parents here, a very common tip is what we do recognize as we work with students also, is that increasingly they struggle a lot with not being able to use a calculator, right? You all will realize that, right? I think it's because they have developed some dependence on the calculator over time. You can tell them, even do very basic calculation, like 35 times 25. They will also think a bit, right? Or just do like 3 times 2 digits, 1 to 5 times 24. Then they will start to struggle already, right? And if that's your child, right, I would recommend that you have to be very disciplined, right? And what does that mean is that mental calculations, the ability to do manual calculations, and like things like this paper one, getting them to sit down and do a paper without using a calculator is going to be a lot more important now. Because in fact, in class, right, I can see a lot of times students will ask me, but teacher, oh, can I just use calculator or not? Right? So even though this question looks quite simple, I want to use calculator. It's a very common tendency that comes to your mind now, right? And that's not good. Why? Because we realize as we mark the exam papers, they make a lot more careless mistakes, right? So students make a lot of careless mistakes. They make a lot of calculation errors, simply because their very basic mathematics hygiene is not there, right? In terms of calculation, in terms of their confidence in, be it multiplying and everything, it has to be there. And I can tell you, these are really the low-hanging fruits thing. And why do I even emphasize that? It's because now you realize the low-hanging fruits has gone up, right? In the past, it was 45, now it's 50 actually. So it does make a lot of difference. In the past, it already made a lot of difference, but now with the new changes, it's going to make more difference, correct? So I would really advise, now actually, if you look at it really in terms of this ability to do calculation, ability to do this kind of mental calculation, because you don't have a calculator, it's going to become a lot more important. Okay, so that's the first thing to note. One other thing to highlight is that you will realize also the good thing for math now is that in the past, a very specific thing, right? There is for this 3, 4, 5 mark question in particular, right? The answer blank, when they ask you to key in the answer, right? They won't give you the units. For example, if the answer was 12 cm, they won't provide the units. And what's the problem with that was that if students forget, that means they write 12, they didn't write the unit, they will get marks penalized. Okay, but the good thing now is that they have indicated, so as part of the exam they will be putting in units if they need the units. That means they'll put that cm for you, right? What's the good thing about that is then you won't forget, correct? And you won't get marks penalized unnecessarily, right? And I think that's a good direction, because then you are not losing marks for nothing, you see, right? So that's a good thing. But a very quick tip here for math is that you all will realize they can be tricky as well. So they can be, the whole question is in meters, right? It's in meters, but the final answer is cm. So they want to see whether did your child get tricked or not, right? So, or did you as a student get tricked because you work through, then maybe you got 1 meter, but you put there 1 cm, then you'll be wrong already, right? So especially when it comes to units, that's where they will always try to lay traps for you as well. Okay, yeah. So that's some of the key things. Science, I would say, is more, as compared to math, I would say is less material in terms of the changes, right? So in terms of the components and all, is still the same, but it's really in terms of the component and the coverage. But there's also going to be increasingly a shift towards emphasis on more higher order thinking questions, more application-based questions, right? And you will see likewise for both math and science, there are always going to be these so-called like stretch or more non-routine questions also. So for mathematics, you all will see in the past year, right? You have that triangle question, right? And then previously you also had the Helen and Ivan question, right? So if you all Google back, those were like the Helen and Ivan question was quite a notorious question of its time. It was what we consider as a non-routine question. So non-routine questions, why do they exist? It's a way for you to really differentiate one student from another. Because you realize actually if the questions are very simple, right? Then um, everybody is going to get the same mark, correct? So there's no way to differentiate. So for you to really differentiate the best student in that subject from another student, that's where these non-routine questions has to come in, right? And I would say the non-routine questions, right? The way to think about it is that is that Mount Everest death zone, right? That is what separates like getting from a two to a one, right? That would be one of the things that make a difference. And the way for you to be really exposed to that is how do you do that, right? Is number one, look back at the I would say not just the PSLE 3-year series, but look back at your prelim papers. So a lot of times, if you look at all the prelim papers out there, they will have their own versions of these non-routine questions, right? And the more you try that, the more experience you will gain on that, right? And for science, I think you all will also recognize last year there was the OTA question, right? The leaf or the fish catch fire, that question, right? So it's same thing, right? So it's the specific context. So it's not just understanding a concept, but how do we link it and understand it in the context of a certain situation, right? And again, another thing that has come out is for science, increasingly you will see experimental based question, right? That means it has become more important over time. That means understanding things like hypotheses, the variables, how do you answer the certain questions? And even here, so much pressure, we do recognize that it's very important. So every week in our worksheet, we provide a template, right, that we actually allow students to go through. So that means if you see a kind of experimental based question, because we realize actually there's many different specific question types actually for experimental based questions, and so there are certain kind of answering techniques and answering templates that we can use for that also, right? So that's also the other thing to recognize here. Okay, so these are some of the key changes that I just want to highlight. But for the subsequent subject specific webinars, there will be a deeper dive, right? In fact, I think for some of the subjects, we also show you what are these examples of trending questions, what are some of these examples of low-hanging fruits that you would see. Okay, yeah, but even from here, you can already see there are already some very real implications, okay, that you will have to take note of. Okay, can so to the question, so is it easier to get AL1 for science? I would say that the difference, what separates between somebody, so two things to note. The one that students always trip up on is the open-ended. Yeah, so the way to think about it for science, right, strategically is your MCQ, you need to maximize your marks as much as possible because the MCQ is going to be the low-hanging fruit component. That's the one that you need to try to get as close to full marks as possible. But open-ended is where the people usually trip up, right? Open-ended is where people usually trip up. So if you want to try to get to a AL1, number one, you have to get your open-ended answering techniques right. And number two, so it's beyond just concept recall. That means it's not just good enough for you to just know what is covered in the science textbook, the science curriculum, but it's being able to answer the open-ended questions well, right? And number two is that ability, like I said, so two different parts, right? Number one, tackling these experimental based questions. And number three, being able to link your concept to the context. And that one, I would say there's no good way around it except to practice more uh, prelim papers where you can then see the different types of trending questions that have been coming out. That's a way for you to better understand the different contexts, okay? The different context itself, okay? Yeah. Okay, so that's the key things to note, okay? Yeah. So the next portion, right? So in terms of the key milestones for primary six, as you all will know, as we trend towards the exam itself, there's a few key things to clear, right? So if you look at it in terms of term one and term two, you will still have your weighted assessment. And thereafter, looking towards the exams in August period is usually the prelims. Then in September, October, that's where the actual PSLE will happen. So these are also some of the key things that you have to work towards. And you would recognize now, actually, if you look at this, right? It is, the case that actually right now, as you go into school, the reality is you are still going to be learning new topics, right? So be it in math, science, more for math and science. English and Chinese is always more component based, correct? But math and science, there are going to be new topics for you to learn. And in fact, some of these topics are very new topics. Like for example, for primary six math, you will be learning algebra, you will be learning uh, fortunately, there are some things that are removed altogether, right? So as part of the syllabus change, you don't need to learn speed anymore. So in the past, your seniors need to learn speed, but now no more speed. Speed is taken out and put in sec one. Yeah, but you will still need to learn algebra. You will still need to learn ratio, right? So this is the first year, right? So for this batch, you are the first year who never learn ratio in P5. So last time, uh, your seniors used to learn ratio in P5, right? So when it comes to P6, it's just reinforcing. But right now, because of the syllabus changes, you all never did ratio in P5. So ratio will be if you have not learned it at home, P6 will be the first time that you're learning it. So why do I highlight all this is because you will realize that, as you go into P6, it's not just revising, right? There are going to be still quite a lot of new topics to catch up on. In fact, I would say all the way to June, right? There will be new topics. So for students with us, what we do is we actually teach ahead here at MindStretcher. So the way to look at that is that, as they learn ahead, it's easy for them to catch up in school. And once we get that out of the way, once we have cleared the concepts that they need to do, then we can also have the revision early to really help them along the process, right? And I will say here, a lot of times the questions that come up, right? And I thought I will address that now as well, is that like not like now, right? Teacher, like we're in the term one, does it what do we do now, right? Is it just like topical practice? Or should we already start to do like exam papers and everything, right? So the idea here is I would say, in fact, it can be both. So the way I would think about it is like that. So when we look at this, right, the way to look at it is you should ask yourself really at end of P5, right? So if you do a stock take at the end of P5, where are you at, right? What was your overall PSLE score? I think that would be a good way to really determine that. But I will come to that later. Okay, so let me come to that in the next couple of slides. How to use your end of year P5 results as a way to stock take your next action plan as you push forward into the new year. Okay, yeah. So with that, I'm coming to the next segment, which is with regards to the issues and challenges that people face. Yeah, so I've answered a few of those questions. Okay, in terms of papers one and two being conducting in one go, is separate, but it's on the same day. So the idea is that, but it's still a stamina test lah. So the thing is that if you look at it, there is a lot of stamina involved, right, in terms of the PSLE. So what's very important is that you will realize a lot of times students lack their attention span. One problem that I do see a lot of students face as we work through with them is that nowadays, I don't know whether it's because it's the TikTok generation, right? Um, their attention span is really limited, right? And they find it hard to even sit through like a 1 hour lesson. How do you even do a test properly and focus properly? Correct? So another very quick tip, like specifically for math, is that apart from mental calculation, manual calculation, is really building the focus, right? The person who is able to sit down and focus and do the work will be the one who will succeed. And actually, interestingly, that's like life also, lah, right? Because if you realize, yeah, at work it's the same thing, right? Who is the one who can sit down and focus and get the work done is the one who will succeed. And it's the same with math, the same with science, same with any subject actually. So it's really a test of stamina also, right? So that's also the other thing to really note. Okay. Okay. One other question: are there other topics other than speed that are removed in math? So okay, the 8 point, the compass, right? Because the thing is that one was not a P6 subject, but at P4 level, it was removed. So that's something that has been also been adjusted out. But apart from that, and apart from speed, those are not removed, but as in other topics are not removed, but they were adjusted in terms of the ordering. What do I mean by that? So things like pie chart, things like nets, your child will have learned earlier on already, right? But last time they used to learn it in P6, but now they have learned earlier on. Then speed is removed and put in Sec 1. But just to be very clear, speed is removed, but rate is still there. So what's the difference between speed and rate? Speed is how fast did Usain Bolt run in the 100-meter marathon race? That is speed, right? Red is like, okay, if I turn on the water tap, how long does it take to fill the water tank? That one can still come out. And that one they like to ask, right? They like to ask, okay, so we have a tank with this volume. If I turn on two tap, how long does it take to fill up the tank? That one can still come out. That one is rate. That one is not speed. Okay, so to be very clear, speed is distance, speed, time, right? Rate is rate is linked to speed, but it's not fully the same, and rate can still come out. So I thought I wanted to make that clear first. Okay, yeah. So okay, in terms of the practical issues and challenges, right, faced by students, right, you will see over here, right, um, quite a few common things that we do see, and some of the I've also alluded to just now already, right? I'll put them all out, right? And so maybe y'all can also type in the chat, right? So for the students here, right, y'all can type in the chat which one is the one that you face the most problem now with, right? So one, right, no motivation to study. Two, always distracted by your phone, right? Maybe you're using it for TikTok, for Roblox, right? Three, got problem focusing. That means you cannot study for more than 30 minutes. Four, always waiting till the very last minute, right? Five, you are working hard, but you are feeling very stressed out. And six, okay, you are trying your best, but somehow it's like I studied yesterday, then today everything I forget. Which one is the one that is the most significant challenge for you now? One, two, three, four, five, or six. You all can type in the chat, right? You all can type in the chat. Okay. Okay, so far I see a few. Okay. Oh, a lot of three and six. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, y'all can continue to type while I see. Okay, very, very, very interesting. Three and six are the very, very common one. Three cannot focus studying for more than 30 minutes, and six cannot remember anything that you just study. Okay, so if I look at this that way, you will see here is more of a studying technique kind of a issue, right? As compared to just a motivation kind of thing, right? And that's something that is actually very telling. Yeah, thanks for that, right? So I see a lot of response, okay? Yeah, and some five and four also, okay? Yeah, okay, can, so let's go through. Thanks very much for the sharing. Yeah, so indeed, right, you will see here actually as we work through with a lot of students, many a times they also do highlight, right? In fact, some people say it's everything, right? Which is not uncommon, right? But amongst this crowd, actually, I see a lot of focus on like the three and the six, which I will also cover later in terms of these techniques. So what would be also useful for the child as well, right? Okay, so with that, right? Maybe what we can do here is that again we can just keep it more informal, and then you all can just type inside the chat for your overall PSLE score. So to be clear, it's not really AL score, it's PSLE score for the end of year P5. What was your PSLE score? You all can just put that in the chat just for me to get a quick sense. Okay, yeah, you all can just put that in the chat. So okay. mm, Thanks. Okay, thanks for that. I do see, yeah, quite a range. Yeah, but also quite a lot of students who have done quite strongly. Yeah, so quite interesting. I think a lot of students here actually like mentioned about the PSLE score 4 to 7. Okay. And then yeah, thanks for that. Right. So I do see quite a range, right? And why do I say that is important? So the way to look at it now is that I will say that the P5 end of year exam is a good litmus test actually. Why? Because you will realize actually for schools, usually when they do the P5 end of year, they would have aligned it to the P6 PSLE exam format already. So that's already a very good first shot. Because all along you will see actually up all the way up to P4 typically, and for your WAs, it's like a diluted version of the paper, right? So your child never had a chance to really sit down and do that exact condition, exact format for the paper. But usually at P5 for some schools, that's where they endeavor to try to put it as the same format. And that's telling because then you can see from there a first litmus test as to where the child could land, right, in terms of the PSLE. But of course, it's not to say that it's predictive because usually also, the difficulty level of the school's exam and the PSLE can differ. But what it does show you is that in terms of where the child lies for the different subject itself, uh, it is actually a good way for you to know is your child in the bucket here, like between 1 to 3, or more in the 4, 5, 6, 7 range? In fact, the way I would think about it is that once you kind of know that, it's also a matter of then looking at it subject by subject, right? Subject by subject, and seeing where your child is in, right? That means is your child also in the like more competitive range or the less competitive range. And the reason why that is important is because it affects the kind of preparation that I will do for the child. Because let's say, for instance, right, let's say the child is now at maybe for subject of mathematics, right? Maybe the child is at the AL6, AL6. So what does it tell me about the child if he's at the AL6 is that it is quite telling that number one, the child is probably having some foundational gaps in some of the topics. And so what I will do actually is, of course, the holidays is ending, but in the start of the new year, that's where I will continue to focus on some of these topical drills and revision. That means I will look back at the P5 paper, and then I will see, okay, so what caused that AL6? Were there very clearly certain topics that he struggled more with? Maybe in terms of fractions, maybe in terms of percentages, or maybe in terms of certain problem sums relating to whole numbers. What is it, right, that is causing him to trip up? And when I can identify that, and usually the way to do it, the best way to do it is you can look at the paper one. The paper one itself, because if he has a AL6, chances are even the paper one is also pulling him down, right? Apart from paper two. So paper one is like a litmus test usually for showing you the foundational gaps. So you can see even if he cannot even do some of these basic fraction questions, it shows you that there's a foundational gap there. Then that's where you have to do topical revision. So for people in this category, I would say actually from AL4 and up, you should still focus a lot on topical revision, topical drills, focusing on those key topics that you have problems with. And the same with science also, right? Then for those of you who are 1 to 3, right? What it shows is that actually if you are at that level, right, like AL1 through 3, your foundation is probably more or less there already, right? But what you lack is more of those exam-based techniques. And for y'all, I would actually advise actually right now, right? It's already a good time to already start some of these test paper practice. But you may tell me, but teacher, we have not learned everything. But one tip there is you can see 3-year series. When you look at 3-year series, you can look at it by topic, right? So there's 3-year series by exam paper. There's also 3-year series by topic. So 3-year series by topic is okay because for those topics you have not done, then you don't need to do yet. But for those you have done, it's already a good time to go through. Why? Because then you can have early exposure to the exam type questions that come out for those topics. Because why I say that is because for that particular topics all the way up to P5, you are in a good foundation already. So that means you can already start to expose yourself to like these exam papers practice, trending questions, looking at that. Okay, that's one thing. And I will always say as a tip is that it's always a good idea to start early, even on the exam paper practice, right? For most folks, because why? Because you want to free up time. Because the more you have been able to get through some of these 3-year series and everything, the more time you can also free up also for practicing like the prelim papers. Because I would say generally, right, it is important to do both, right? Why is it important to do both? Because if the PSLE itself, you see, it comes out already, right? Usually, if that interesting question come out already, the chances that it come out in the next year is not really there already, correct? But among schools, when they come out with their prelim papers, it's always their best effort at predicting what can come out in the PSLE. So what happens is as you go around schools and you do the prelims, that expose you to a greater variety of questions and possibly trending questions over the year also. So the tip is that, it's good to start early for paper practice and to go beyond 3-year series. So a lot of people do ask like, is 3-year series enough? I think beyond the 3-year series is also important to complement that with your prelim papers. That's very important because, in fact, prelim papers themselves are the school's best attempt at predicting what can come out in the actual PSLE. So the more you get yourself exposed to that, the more familiar, right, you are with different question types also, right? And the other thing to note is I know some of you also have a question in your mind, right? Which is like now I tell you there's so much changes There's some changes, not so much. Some changes here and there to the, past the exam format and all. Is it still worthwhile to do the 3 year series? Definitely. So you see, even though I did mention some changes just now, it does not change the underlying fundamental structure of the paper, right? It's still going to be, there's still going to be MCQ, there's still going to be problem sums, there's still going to be MCQ, there's still going to be open-ended questions. So it doesn't change that, right? So definitely you still need to continue to practice. It doesn't make the past year series irrelevant, right? In short, okay. So that's the other thing that I wanted to highlight here. Okay, okay. Let's pause to see whether there are any questions. Okay. Ah, yeah. I just answered the question, right? So there was this question: papers not valid. No, definitely the papers are still valid, guys. Remember, like what I said just now, the fundamental structure has not changed. What has changed is more about just some coverage and percentages in terms of each of the paper only. But the nature of the paper has not changed. So very important, the past year papers are still valid. Okay, that's important. Difference between current syllabus and old syllabus. Actually, the one I went through just now already. So if you can revisit that as part of the later on we'll be sharing this as a video also, so that everybody can still recap on that. But in short, I've talked about what's the difference for the topic-based subjects and also even for English, right? Where it's also in terms of the changes, more focus in terms of the oral and everything. Okay, yeah. So with that, right? So I've come to this segment to look at it in terms of some of these setting goals and targets, developing effective study techniques and building the right habits and mindset. I think it's a good one right now. That means it's early in the year, and it's actually a good time for you together with your child to actually sit down together and to use it as a way to go through, right, and to set goals. I think maybe as a show of hand, right, maybe for those students here, you all can indicate in the chat how many of you have uh know what secondary school you want to go already. If you know already, you can type yes. If not, you can type no. Even for science, guys, so some of you ask me think if you use old syllabus assessment books to revise, is it okay? It's perfectly fine. Because you all look, right, for science, right, also there are not many significant changes to the syllabus. So some parts of it, for example, like cells, right? Cells has been removed. But apart from that, actually, if you look at it in terms of the key changes for science, what they have done is that they have just they have standardized the flow across schools in terms of the topical sequences. Then have downplayed the importance on the topic on cells. And then what are some of the minor tweaks to the exams that they have done is that sometimes now, like what I mentioned, more focus on higher order thinking questions and experimental questions. For MCQ, there's an interesting thing where now they can have two-part MCQ. That means the two MCQ is linked to the same experiment, right? Last time usually is one question, one context, but now it's possible one context, two question linked to it. But it doesn't change things, you see. As in what you did in the past, the papers in the past are all still relevant. Most of them, right? In fact, like just that little topic. And same for math also. So math, if you see in the past speed, then you just don't do speed, right? So speed is not coming out, don't need to do speed. Uh, but other questions you should still do, correct? So definitely don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. Those are all still important. It's just minor things only. Those minor things to remove. Okay? Yeah, just to be very clear. Okay, so let's take a look at the chat. Yeah, thanks very much everybody for being participative. Okay, I do see more yes than no. That's very good actually. Uh, that's very good. Yeah, so I think depending on the crowd, um, last time, I don't know. Last year, it seems like more people said no. And in fact, for my own students also, most people usually don't have a clue where they want to go, what they want to do. And why do I say that's important? And I think this is a good time actually at the start of the year for you to really do that. And I'm going to just take the chance to show you all a template that we have so that you can see how you can use that, okay, as a way to go through with your child, right? And then we can share that later with you all also. So you all can see this particular template, right? It's a good way for you to do basic goal setting with your child. And I think one of the things that came up just now is that people always say they lack motivation, correct? They lack motivation. Um, and one way to create motivation actually for the child is to understand the why, right? That means why do I need to study for PSLE? Why do I need to do well, right? And it's not just to make my parents happy, correct? There's actually something ahead for me, right? And what's that? So this is a good exercise given that it's early in the year, that you can also use this as a way to go through with a child, and you can then put it on top of their, it's a bit like a so-called vision board where they can then feel more motivated and a bit more inspired to want to do well. And the way to do it is actually, you can see it can be tied to things like that. So if you all look at this page, right, this is what we call as a school finder MOE. This is already a good way for you to kind of set targets. Like, what are some of the dream schools that you want to get to? And if you all look at this particular page, MOE School Finder, and you click on secondary, right, you all can actually see over here the list of secondary schools with the cut-off points from the last year, right? That means what points was needed for you to get into the school. I believe they have not updated for 2025, 2020. Yeah. Okay, so this one here, so it's essentially, I don't think they have fully updated yet for the 2020. Uh, Let me see. This one I need to double check because y'all will know that the posting exercise has just wrapped up. So not clear whether they have fully revised that. But in short, what y'all can do is y'all can use this as a way to gauge, because y'all will see actually the cutoff points don't change that much from year to year. So if y'all look at it that way, right? Okay, let me just toggle over there. Sorry about that. Right, y'all can see, for instance, right? Let's say I really want to get into a certain school, like maybe Anglican, right? And you click on Anglican, y'all can see over here, you can actually see the cutoff, right? And y'all can see this is what I mean, guys, in case some of you were wondering, right? Do y'all see? Anglican only got posting group 3 only. That means if your score didn't allow you to get into posting group 3, you will not be able to get into Anglican, right? Okay, so that's the thing to note. So again, you can see over here, if you click on Anglican, you realize, okay, so Anglican is a dream school for me, right? I do want to get into Anglican, and the score was like a 12, right? So then that will be the base for you to work on. You see, that's how we do target setting and goal setting very concretely. Because if you just tell your child like goal setting is, oh, I just work hard, lor, right? I play less computer game, I work hard. But there's nothing concrete to work towards, correct? So how do we think of goals is, you can think of it as essentially, look at it like work backwards from there, right? Like, what are the schools that I'm really interested in? Like maybe my brother went there, he really likes it. My friend went there, he really likes it. And I thought, worthwhile, right? And it's near my place. Anglican is something I want to work towards. So what's Anglican? Anglican is a 12. So how do I work towards a 12? Then you work backwards from there. So once you have that in mind, right? So then you can go ahead to the, so if I just walk through with you just as a short one, you can see over here, that's where you can have this exercise with a child. So what is the goal that you want to get, right? So maybe what you want to do is, I want to get into Anglican, right? Anglican, right? By Sec 1, correct? So it's a very specific, right? Very specific goal, right? It is relevant to you, and there's a specific time that you need to achieve it by, correct? The main thing to know is you must also ask yourself, is achievable or not, right? So there's no point in, let's say, if your child now is at, say, PSLE, I mean the score of like, say, like 18 based on P5 results, and he's really aiming for a school that has a cutoff of like 6 or 7. Yeah, okay. So the idea is if you look at it that way, right? It is not quite achievable, not quite realistic. Correct? So always think about something that is more realistic, something that we can work towards, that is within our achievable boundary in that sense, right? So that's the thing to take note. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So MOE Finder is updated. I think they updated earlier compared to previous. I think they have to do that also because of the appeal. Okay. Yeah. So the idea behind that is, you can then see over here. Once we have that, right? You see, this is a very concrete goal. And why is it important to me? Because I really like the culture, right? Right, of the school, and I want to make my parents proud. Correct? So answer the why. Correct? And from there, since you know it's 12, right? You know that it's a PSLE score of 12. That's what you can work towards, right? That's what you can work towards. So what are the small related goals? The small related goals is then where you can break it down for all the students here, right? So you can look at it as in terms of English, in terms of Chinese, right? In terms of math, and in terms of science, right? What is your AL score that would build towards a 12? So maybe you think of it as, okay, English now, maybe I'm quite very, very strong, right? And I feel really good about English, so I'm going to gun for a 1, okay? But Chinese really not quite there, right? It's like I'm at like a 6, so maybe I'll try for a 4, right? My math and science, I'm also struggling a bit, right? Math, I'm actually at a 6, so I'm going to try for like a 4, right? And then science, I'm okay. I'm still better than math. I'm currently at a 5. I'm going to try for a 3. You see? So that's how you can then build towards that, right? That means once you have your overall score that you're trying to work towards, you then break it down into what we call as these smaller goals. And what the smaller goals is very concrete score goals that you want for each of your subject, right? So it's like working backwards from there, you see? Because you know this is where you want to get to, and then this is what you need to achieve for each of the subject. And do you see my thought process? My thought process is I always try to anchor based on where am I currently. That means now if you look at it, where are you in P5? Right? Where are you in P5? Right? And I'll say that, it's good to keep it more realistic also. Right? But of course, I will say that of course don't write yourself off. There are students who have been maybe who got like AL 6 and still jump to a AL 1 is still possible. But you have to ask yourself whether that is something in terms of the effort, in terms of your attitude and all you're able to do, right? So that's where you have to also factor in that consideration also, correct? But what you have seen is that just now as I look through it, I've tried to also have a reference, right? And thinking through how much I can improve from there, right? I can improve from there. So maybe at the time I was like that, right? This was what I was saying, 2 6 6 5. It's always about making good improvements in a reasonable, realistic manner, right? So in that sense, and being able to achieve the target that we want to set, right? So with that, then you see, once you have this, then it's very clear to you already, right? That this is what I need to work towards, right? This is what I need to work towards. And then this part here is optional. So if you feel, okay, then given that, what's the challenge that I face, right? So maybe you don't like to speak for English oral, right? Very shy, right? Or you are, run out of time for a math exam, right? Then once you know these are the key challenge, then you can think about what's the action plan that you need to take. So maybe for English, you need to really step up on oral exam practice, right? So maybe you need more oral practice, right? And then for math, you need to practice more trending questions, right? From prelims. Okay? Then you can set a timeline of by when, right? But this part, I would say this page is uh, less critical, but what's most critical is the first page. Because once you do that, right, you have answered your why and you have worked towards the specific targets that you want to work towards. So then you have it in mind, you see, I have in mind where I want to go. I have in mind what I need to work towards in terms of the AL score for each subject. So it becomes very clear to me there's a goal that I need, right? As compared to, I'm just now here, I just do whatever I can, lor, then I just hope for the best. Then that one is not really as motivating in that sense. Okay, so this is just one thing that I wanted to share with you all, and later on we also share this template that you all can also try with your child, right? If you want, right? So that's for that. So with that, let me just toggle back to the slides also, and then we will go to the next portion on the um, study planning part. So this whole study planning part is that if you look at it more holistically, the idea here is that, of course, this is more like a illustrative one, right? The idea is that it makes sense for us to do it in terms of month by month, week by week, and then day by day, right? So the idea of building a plan is look at it in terms of month by month. So given now, if you look at it, we are going into January, and then January all the way to your D-Day, land date, right? Of August, right? For the prelims. You only have that 8 months or so, right? So month by month, what do you need to do for that particular subject? That's what you need to do, right? So that means, for instance, like what we said, right? So maybe my child now is still a bit weaker in terms of the topical review. So month by month, the first 2 months or so, I'm still going to focus a lot on topical revision. Then up to maybe like March or April. Then after that, May, June, July, maybe you can concentrate on exam paper practice, right? That can be one possibility. So you know one month by month what you want to do. Then after that, once you know month by month what you need to do. So this is more of like a illustration, right? Let's say for science, right? For science, working backwards. This one I kind of compress the time frame a bit more. So this one, but now you all have more luxury of a not luxury lah, but a bit more time. So you all can pace it out a bit. But this one is for somebody, let's say you go into June. What will you do if you only have until from June to the end? So you see, then we pace it out, we build in the buffers, we build in what we need to cover. Then you can look at it as week by week, what do you need to do? So for instance, let's say for this guy, he wants to do this topical review, right? And then he wants to do the practice papers in the last month or so. Then week by week for that particular topic, what does he need to cover? Right? So think of it that way and do it for all the different subjects, right? So it will make sense for you to think of it as there is a monthly planner and then a weekly planner, right, for each of the subject. And from there, that's where you can then create what we call as a to-do list, right? And again, I'm just going to show you all, take a chance to show you all another template that we will share, which is this particular one here on a to-do list template. So as you will know, actually, this is not new, right? To-do list, actually, all adults usually will have, correct? If you are working in the workplace, you will have a to-do list of what you need to do, right? But for students, a bit less common. Usually for students, we will just think of it in terms of what homework did my teacher give me today? I will just do. Then my mom tell me to work on this, then I do lah. But if I got time to finish, then I finish. But no time, then maybe do tomorrow, correct? But to make it more accountable, to make it more disciplined for the child, is to set out. So once you have done like what we said, the monthly plan and the weekly plan, you can then consolidate everything that you need to do per week, right? Per week. And then you split it up by days. So for example, let's say we are going into tomorrow, 30th December, right? And it's like still a holiday. What then do I need to do, right? What are the key tasks? So maybe, oh, I haven't write the compo my teacher gave me as homework yet. So maybe I need to write compo, right? Then you can just set any duration, right, that you need. Then after that, you can do all things like that, right? So practice 10 math problems, right? 10 math problems on fraction. So maybe that one you can have like another hour, right? And then here, study science topic on electricity, right? Maybe 1 hour. So you can see you just set out. So based on what you have set out for that particular week that you need to achieve and for that particular day, you then put it in terms of to do. And once you have done it, then you check it off, correct? And you can rank them also. So let's say, for instance, this one is the most important. Uh, then you put it as first, correct? Because that one is your school homework and your teacher give you a homework you never do, then you're going to get in trouble, right? So that would be first. Then maybe your own practice, you can then think of it as, okay, uh, how do I think about it? The way I'll think about it is how we rank it is think of it very practically, right? That you also want to see which one is the one that requires the most brain power because you will realize that the more you work through the day, the more tired you become. So generally, you also want to put things that requires a lot of effort, and the most urgent one you want to put first, right? So if you look at it, math is always a problem for me, right? A lot of brain power needed, so I need to put it at second. Then after that, it's like a bit of a short break already where I can just top up with science. You see, just studying only. Correct? So that's the way to do it. Because it wouldn't make sense because you would think of it that way, right? If you do the compo, then after that you do something like study science, then at the end of the day you're very tired. You try to do math problem sums. Quite difficult also. So always try to, get through some of the more difficult tasks first, right? And you can see from there, then once you have this to-do list, that's where you can put it out in terms of a schedule, right? So you can think of it as, okay, so tomorrow I need to go my grandma's place, or when I come back, then maybe it's like 2 p.m. So maybe from like 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. I can do the compo, right? And then maybe 3 to 3:30, I can have a snack break, right? And then 3:30 to the next one, which is the 4:30. You can have the math problems, right? Practice math. Okay. And then 16:30 to 5:30, study science. So you just set it out. That means you see whatever to-do list that you have, you then really plan it out in terms of the schedule, like really hour by hour. Then with that, right, why do you want to do this? Is because two things. Number one, then you become accountable, right? So that means today, what I really need to do is I need to clear my to-do. Right? I cannot wait till tomorrow. That means there's no such thing as if I cannot do, then I wait till tomorrow. Right? Because you keep doing that, then you keep pushing everything to tomorrow. Correct? So what you need to do is you put it out as a to-do, you prioritize it, and then you put it properly into your schedule. Right? You put it properly into your schedule. You allocate time to get it done. Right? And once you have this schedule plan, then you would get more things done as compared to, of course, a lot of my students usually they won't do this. They will be like, oh, I just see lor my mood lor. Today my mom asked me to practice some papers, so I just practice a bit, do a bit, take my sweet time. How much I can do. That's all. Correct? But there's no aim or no goal. Right? So in this case, if you set it out in terms of the task, then there's more things that you can try to achieve. Okay, so that's also the other thing in terms of how do we build out that study plan, right? In terms of looking at this. So that's the other thing that I wanted to also highlight. Okay, so with that, right? So maybe what I'll do now is I'll toggle back to the slide. Sorry, I know I'm going a bit over time, but because there were some questions and I wanted to answer them, I'm nearing the last segment. So if y'all could still stay back for a short while, it would be appreciated. But yeah, but if not, no worries, right? So you just adjust accordingly based on your schedule. Okay, so let's go on to the next part now. So I've gone through already a few things, right? So I've gone through goal setting, I've gone through study planning. Now the very next important thing is, so this is the one actually. So this is what it looks like in a slide form, but this is what I worked through with you all just now, right? When you put it into a schedule and be very concrete. So that means don't just ask your child, do maths. Be very specific that, oh, I need you to do these 5 problem sums and specifically on this topic on circles, right? So then it's very clear what is needed, right? And of course, then you can do it by session, right? So the first one is here, and one could be after dinner, right? And this becomes more important actually as we go into the new year because in the new year, that's where there will be homework, they will still have to study and so on. So definitely, setting this out it becomes clearer, right, in terms of what the child needs to achieve from day to day. This part here I want to cover a bit is because I think a lot of you also mentioned you find it very hard to focus, right? So this is something, right, that has worked for me, but again, whether it works for everybody, I think is subjective. So I would say that this is something that I'm just putting as something that is worthwhile trying, but you can see whether it works for you or not. And this is what we call as that Pomodoro technique method, which actually I think even for a lot of adults, uh, it works for some, but maybe not for the others. So you have to see whether it works for you. So what is Pomodoro? The idea behind Pomodoro is trying to get into a kind of flow state. Right. And what do we mean by a flow state is that you will see here, I think some of you here, you may play games, right? You may play Roblox and all that kind of thing. And realize sometimes when you play, right, you get into this really like, how do I call it? Invincible, godlike state. What do I mean by that? That means you like very in the moment, very concentrated, very focused, right? And do you realize actually then when you're in that state, right, you realize you are virtually unbeatable, right? Have you all been in that state before? Maybe for the students here, you all can type yes or no. Have you all been in that state? The one that I talk about. That means you all play a game, you are very focused, right? And nobody can stop you. You are unstoppable, right? Yes, I see a lot of response. Yes, right? But do you all realize you all can get into that in a game state, but you all cannot get into that when you are studying. You all realize, right? A lot of times you play game is possible, but when you study, you realize you cannot. So the idea is that what you need to do now to succeed in your study is to try to get into that same state that I was talking about when you study, right? And how does that happen? It can only happen when you really try to consciously focus, right, when you are studying. And how do we do that? Is that you see a lot of times when people study now, it may be that they have their phone with them, or maybe after they study 10 minutes, they'll go and say, oh, mama, I want to go and eat a snack, or maybe somebody ring the doorbell, I need to go and open the door, that kind of thing. You realize that it's very distracting, correct? Because after every 5 minutes, I'm doing something, correct? And especially the newer generation, right? Where, be it like you all watch YouTube, you all look at social media and so on, is more limited attention span. So the way for you to really focus is to enforce yourself by doing that. And what do I mean by that is if you look at this Pomodoro session, right? There's this what we call as study blocks. So when I mean this 25-minute study block, it means that in that 25 minutes, you will sit at your table and you will study, and you will do nothing but study. That means try not to go to the toilet, never touch your phone, and if the doorbell rings or what, you tell your brother or sister go and open the door. Right? That means you do nothing but you just focus and study the 25 minutes. Okay? That is how you can then get into a flow state because you are really focused on just doing the task at hand. Then after the 25 minute, you can have an alarm. So after 25 minutes, the alarm rings, you get a 5 minute rest, right? And the 5 minute, you can do what you want, get a snack and everything. Then once that 5 minutes is up, you go back to the next 25-minute block again. So do you see what is so unique about this is that it enforces a block of time very systematically that you are studying, focus on studying and not doing anything else. And once you can enforce that, it's much easier for you to get into that same gaming flow state that I talk about. Because gaming, you see, why you can get into a flow state is because nobody need to tell you to focus. You know that if you don't focus, you lose. Correct? So you focus. But study, unfortunately, is not so obvious to you, right? You can lose, but the idea that you're losing comes much slower. So that's why you don't really care as much. Correct? So the way for you to psychologically get yourself focused is like that. Okay, you must really get into that flow state. Use it as a way to look at this as blocks of time that you can set up. So 25 minute, 5 minute rest, 25-minute study, 5 minute rest. Then finally, at the end of the last session, then you can have a longer rest time. That means after 4 sessions you complete already, that's about 100 minutes you studied already, right? You can then have a longer 30-minute rest. So with that, actually, you will realize it's easier for you to get into a flow. It's easier for you to be more productive. Okay. But I know some of you may ask, but teacher, but if I'm trying to do problem sums, I'm trying to write compo, 25 minutes is not enough. So that's where you can adjust accordingly. Nobody say it must be cast in stone 25. It can be longer. So you can do 35 minutes, then you have a longer rest time of 7, right? 35-minute study, 7-minute rest, followed by the next session, 35-minute study, 7-minute rest. Then the final session, after session 3, you can have a longer rest time of 20 to 30 minutes. Or the final one is you can also do like 40 minutes or 1 hour is also possible. So you can adjust accordingly. Then of course you must be flexible. So guys, don't so say that, oh, teacher say this, then how I do exam paper? Cannot do exam paper because cannot Pomodoro. So of course when you do exam paper, you need to follow the time limit of the paper if you're doing under exam condition, right? So you must still be flexible, must still exercise flexibility. This one is more like when you're doing topical revision, when you're doing component practice, then it will be easier to enforce that. So you all can try that, okay? So it's really that, right? It's really that idea, okay? So that is one part to take note, okay? Then, okay, so going on, this is what I mentioned just now, the idea that you must stay focused during the Pomodoro session to get into the flow state. And just now I also mentioned, right, the more important challenging tasks you do first, so you'll be less tired. Very important two other things psychologically, right, is this idea of what we call as interleaving. So for the parents here to note, right, there's this concept called interleaving when we study. There are two ways to interleave things. So what is interleave? Interleave is like that. So what you all will realize is that a lot of times when we study, right, we only do one thing like on the day itself, right? Um, Maybe I'll say I will just do math. So I will just study math and then I would concentrate very hard on doing fractions, and that's it, correct? And it's not altogether a bad thing because you realize we do need to get through topical review and everything, right? To get the foundation right, the drills right. But it's not enough just to do that, right? That means you cannot just keep doing that. And why? It's because it's not training the right muscle memory. So you realize actually to do well in like topic-based subjects, right? There are two kinds of muscle memory you need to train. The first kind of muscle memory is topical. That means you need to get your foundation right. That means I look at fractions, I know how to multiply, I know how to divide, I know how to add and minus, I know how to do problem sums. That's the first type. But there's also a second type. And what's the second type of muscle memory? The second type is the exam type. So what happens is that you'll realize during exam, they are going to mix a lot of different topics together, right? And once they mix, you realize that's where the problem begins for the child. Especially for subjects like science, you realize once they mix, they'll be like, which topic is this? What are the keywords here that I need to use? It was very clear for me last time when I do topical because it's very obvious to me, right? I'm doing this topic, transport and plants. Very clear to me, this is the concept, correct? Because all the questions also look similar. But now in the exam, everything mixed together. How I know what is what, right? So you see, that is actually a different problem for the child actually. And that's also explains why sometimes you see the child does very well when he do assessment book like topic or for the worksheet. But when it comes to exam, he cannot do well. It's because he has never ever trained this part of his brain. Like how do we look at the exam paper? How do we identify the right topic? How do we pull out that muscle memory accordingly? So that's the other thing that he has to train. And that's where interleaving comes in. So interleaving is the idea that at some point you should mix things together. That means you don't just do one topic, you mix, right? So you can do like fractions, you can do like ratio, and then you do a mix revision, mix review. As you mix the questions, mixing the questions is a good way for you to habituate to the kind of muscle memory that you need. So that's interleaving in a subject. Then secondly, there's also interleaving at the cross subject level. So even studies have shown that some if you just pair different subjects together, you can actually learn more effectively. For instance, let's say you do like something content intensive, like maybe science, right? So you're learning a certain topic, then after that you go and do a English comprehension. Even though the exam doesn't require it, but the fact that your brain is making linkages, like you see, oh, quite interesting, what I just did in science, I'm seeing in this complete passage, it forms connections that enables the brain to also learn and just be more engaged better also. So that's what we call as like that concept of interleaving. Okay. Finally, the last thing. Okay, so not to contradict, the last part is at any point in time, what I mean by focusing on one task at hand means you don't do two things together. That means you cannot be using your phone and then writing your compo, or you cannot be like, wow, I study science on my big screen, then on my small screen I write my compo. Cannot, right? So some people always claim, right, that they are very good at multitasking. But the reality is that if you are good at multitasking, it just means that you are bad at each of the tasks. Because the reality is that all of us only have that limited amount of brain power, right? So it's a matter of whether you are choosing to allocate the brain power to just a single task or you are dividing it across many tasks. Okay, and the reality is if you are dividing across many tasks, then you just have less brain power per task, right? So the idea is don't multitask, just focus on one task at any one point. Okay, and the same goes for like music. So some people always like to ask, is it a good idea to listen to music when I study? I would say that, and maybe y'all can type in the chat, how many of you listen to music when you study? Like for the students here, right? So yeah, some of you do, right? Okay. Yeah. So very interesting, right? So music, right? I would say that it has been shown, when you do easy things, music helps you to get the groove going. That means when you do like practice questions and all that you're quite familiar with, right? Music helps you to relax, helps you to do it better. But when you're doing very difficult things, music actually interferes with your concentration, right? And why? Again, it goes back to your brain power, correct? Because when you're doing something super difficult, like maybe writing a compo for the first time or doing a very difficult problem sum for math, you need a lot of brain power. And when you listen to music, actually, some of that brain power is being diverted to that. So in a sense, you are also multitasking a bit. So for very challenging tasks, actually, it has been shown that it's not a good idea to listen to music for very difficult tasks. Like when you're learning something for the first time or when you're doing something quite difficult. But if you're doing something quite easy, that means you're just revising a concept or you're just doing some questions again, it's okay to listen to music. Okay? So that's because some people like to ask that question. But of course it depends on you also. So if you're somebody like say if from like young, like in kindergarten, you come out, you already have headphone on your ear, you're very used to that, then just go with that. Right? Go with what is much more naturally inclined for you, right? because you are already used to that, then it's fine. But if you're not used to that, but you are just asking, right, is it okay for me to now try to listen? Then my advice to you will be it depends, right, on whether it's an easy task or a difficult task. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so with that, right, I'll wrap up with this last part, which is what I mentioned just now regarding the stock take, right, of where you are. And in fact, I talked about that just now already. So you can see here how I would differentiate that is look at where you are right now. When you look at like, are you like AL 1 to 3 or are you at like AL 4 to 8? Because if you're at AL 4 to 8, I would say actually there's a lot more scope for you to make improvement by focusing on low-hanging fruits. That means even by doing things like making sure that you get your concepts right for science, making sure that you get your paper one questions right for math, it already helps a lot already. So if you are at 4 to 8, I would say focus a lot more on getting your low-hanging fruits right. That means your concepts, your topical drills correct. Because once you can do that, it's like you are just climbing the base of Mount Everest, right? You can make progress very fast. Okay? But if you are at AL 1 to 3, I would say your fundamentals are already there. Of course, there are still new topics that you need to practice. There are still certain weaker topics that you can focus on. But I would say alongside that, it's already good for you to already start on some of this past year paper practice. And I know you have not done everything, so no issue. You can always do it on a topical level, right? So you can always look at 3 year series, try some of the topical level questions, even look at some of the prelim papers, try some of the topics that you already know. That will be a good way for you to start to identify what are these trending questions and also identify some of the stretch questions as well, right? And also it gives you time because there's a lot of papers that you can work on. And I would say for subjects like math, the more you do, the better you train your muscle memory and the more questions you're aware. Remember, nobody nobody goes into math. The best students don't go into math with 0% recognition of questions. The best students for math goes into the exam knowing about 75% of the questions already. It looks super familiar to them. So it's only the last, in fact, I would say the very best, maybe even up to 90% they've seen before. It's really the last 10 or 5% that they need to work out a bit. Then that's the recipe for success because you realize these are also the students who has a lot of time to check, right? They can finish the paper well within time, they can check and everything. So you may always wonder, but how come my child cannot? Like every time he struggle, like half like the paper blank, don't even have time to check. It's because it's too new to him, right? A lot of the questions are new to him. He starts from scratch as he think. There's no time to think from scratch. So the secret here is that nobody thinks from scratch in the exam, right? You have to try as far as possible to not think from scratch for most of the question. Okay, so that's the key actually, right, to exam success. Okay. Okay, so with that, right, like what we mentioned, one key part is I think some of you also mentioned just now is you try to study, but um, you don't really study and register what you are learning, right? That means you don't really internalize it. So it's as though I studied yesterday, but now everything that I studied is all lost. And the reason for that is I think just now when you watch the preview clip, right? Some of you may have seen the difference between passive learning and active studying, right? And I'm sure some of you here also watch Netflix. So why I talk about Netflix is because Netflix is a more passive example. That means as an audience, you see when you watch Netflix, when you watch movie, right? You're very passive, right? You're eating popcorn, you're letting the scenes wash over you. Then at the end of it, if I ask you, right, chances are you will forget a lot of what was happening in the film. And why? Is because you were not engaged with it, right? That means you were being passive. You were not actively engaging with the topic. But when you do topic-based subjects, it's always important to do this thing that is what we call as active learning or active studying. So that means what is important is you don't continue to highlight your notes or summarize your notes and type your notes, that kind of thing. Um, it's not the best way to do it. But rather the best way to do it for topic-based subjects, especially like science, where there are certain concepts that you do need to internalize. A good way to do it is you can just flip to the front, like be it you can look at the curriculum document or your book, textbook, you look at the learning objective. That means in this topic, what are the key objectives that I need to cover? Then you use that to test yourself. That means you ask yourself, okay, what are the parts of our circulatory system and their function? Then you test yourself, okay, so what are the parts? What are their function? You ask yourself first. And once you ask yourself and you realize, oh, actually, I can remember this very well, then there's no need for me to really go back to that again, right? But if there's something that maybe I don't really know, that means, transport in plants, right? What is this function? Or maybe in an electric circuit, what is this? Right? I don't really know. Then you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to make a mental note here. I'm going to go back and I'm going to review it again. You see? So we start not by just rereading. We start by testing ourselves based on the learning objectives. Then it becomes a kind of active learning, right? And in fact, some students go to the extent of doing like flashcards and everything. I don't think that's really necessary at the primary school level yet. Maybe more at the secondary level, especially when it's a lot more intensive. But given that primary school actually they have less subjects and less content, it's not as critical. But that could be another way that you can explore. So if you feel that flashcards help in terms of testing your understanding of concepts and knowledge too. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so this is active learning. And by doing active learning, you will realize it's easier for you to internalize something. Because what's happening is, again, right, you are mimicking the motion of pulling out a memory, a knowledge from your brain. You see? Right? It's the same skill that's needed for exam. Because exam, you will just look at the question, you have to pull it out from your brain. Correct? Right? You're not going to have an open book for you to refer to. Right? So that's why you can see people need to get used to that. Right? You cannot just look at the book and refer and flip. Right? It's too passive. Right? You need to do active studying by doing this. Right? By doing this method. Okay? And yeah, so I think that's the key part. And generally, this is what I mentioned just now, the idea of the topical practice and also the exam paper practice to recognize the trending questions. And finally, I thought I would just wrap up these last two parts before I take some remaining questions. It's really about building the right mindset. So a lot of times, I think a lot of students also mention, right? I don't have motivation, right? So teacher, they said, I don't have motivation, uh, and I don't want to study because I don't have motivation. But I think the main thing that you all need to realize in your life is that motivation actually is not like the magic pill to keep you going. In fact, I would recommend that, it's not so much motivation that's important, but really more about developing the right habits and the right system. So, and the truth is like that. So I think a lot of you also know, right? Sometimes you watch YouTube, you watch this really inspirational video of a runner with the epic music and you feel very, very inspired. Then you feel like, wow, I need to work very hard because I feel so inspired. Then you go and do your math problems. Within 15 minutes, you feel like, this is so tiring. I lose all motivation. Correct? So why I brought that out is because you realize it's not sustainable, right? Motivation is almost like this magic pill, like you pop it in, maybe it works for 5 minutes, but after that, it kind of wears off. The only thing that can see you through is really the discipline, right? The idea that no matter how tired you are, no matter how demotivated you are, you will just wake up, show up, and do the thing again and again every day, right? Like based on the study plan that I mentioned, right? It doesn't matter whether you're motivated or not. You just have these three to-dos from 7:30 to 9:30, you just get it done, right? If you have that mindset, right, that regardless of motivation, I just need to get it done, clear my to-do list every day by day, week by week, month by month, then you will get to where you need to get to. Okay, so that's a very important thing that I thought as a takeaway for everybody here is really the discipline and the habits that would show through for you, right? And not so much the motivation. Okay? Yeah, because a lot of people always say, I don't have motivation. So how do I solve that problem? But I will feel that the bigger problem is that you shouldn't be so caught up with motivation, right? The bigger thing to solve here is really building the habits and building the systems. Okay? Yeah, so that's also the other thing that I wanted to highlight. Finally, maybe I'll end off with this. Because a lot of people also do mention that you have a problem with procrastination, right? Though I didn't really see too much of that just now. Quite interesting. So it feels like this group probably don't procrastinate as much. But procrastination definitely is something that I think all people, including adults, are also guilty of. So here I want to just tell you all two main rules that you can use to have the right mindset. So what's the right mindset is number one, you will realize 5 minute rule. What is 5 minute rule? 5 minute rule means, a lot of times, right, as students, when we try to do something, we always overthink a lot. You'll be like, "Aya, this one a bit too difficult for me. Aya, what if I do it and I fail?" Right? And then you realize you spend a lot of time thinking more than you are doing. Correct? And worse still is you think so much that you never even start. Correct? So the idea of the 5 minute rule is don't think, just start. That means don't think too much. It's like swimming like that. Because you all know the first time when you all do swimming, right? you all were very scared to get into the water because you may feel that it's too cold, what if I drown, etc. But you realize what happens. The thing is, your coach will just tell you, just jump in. Don't think too much, just jump. Because once you jump in, then you realize you get used to the water temperature, you start to float. You realize actually it's quite okay. Correct? And it's the same with work also. That means you don't think too much. You just tell yourself, I'm just going to start working. And I'm going to give myself 5 minutes to work on this. Right? I will just do it for 5 minutes. Then you tell me, but teacher, so 5 minutes only. That means after 5 minutes, I can go and play, is it? So it's not that. It's more like a psychological trick. The psychological trick here is that once you get to work on something for at least 5 minutes, it will give you the momentum to continue on. Okay? So it's like that for anything. Once you get into the groove, once you get into the flow, usually within 5 minutes or so, you will want to continue to work because you already have the momentum ready. And then all your negative thoughts, everything will also disappear. So that's what we call as a 5 minute rule. That means just do it. Don't think, just do it and tell yourself I'll do for 5 minutes. And once that 5 minutes get going, you will then build momentum for the rest of that process. Okay, so that's 5 minute rule. The next one is the 2 minute rule. These are not contradicting. The 2 minute rule, right? What's 2 minute rule? I'm sure a lot of you have this problem where sometimes you see maybe at your desk now, right? Maybe you just drink Milo from breakfast, then it's like your mom asks you to put the Milo back at the kitchen sink, you don't want to put. Right? So the whole day your Milo cup is still there on the table, correct? And you realize these are what we call as these tasks, right? Very basic, tedious tasks, very simple to do, but you just don't want to do because it's too tedious, right? Like filing a paper and all that kind of thing, too minor. But you realize when they accumulate, it becomes a big problem, right? Your worksheets are not filed, your cups are all on the table, right? You become very cluttered, correct? So what we do by 2 minute rule means you just ask yourself this task, right? Clearing my Milo cup. Does it take less than 2 minutes? If it takes less than 2 minutes, then you do it now. Okay, you do it now. Because why do you do it now? Because you just clear it. You just clear this thing. And I just read over the weekend, which is very interesting also, right? Even for the adults. So is this idea of closing the loop. So a lot of times, even mentally, right, you feel that sometimes you feel very bothered, very cluttered, right? And the reason why is because it's not because you have a lot of things to do, but it's because you have a lot of open loops that are not closed. Be it like this WhatsApp message that you just never respond to this person, or be it like this task that you never do. And it's like things that are at the back of your head, but it just keeps bothering you because it's an open loop that's not closed. And the more you close them, right? And if it takes less than 2 minutes, just close it, close it, close it, close it. You realize the more you close them, the more you free up your brain actually, right? And your brain and your physical space becomes less cluttered. It actually allows you to focus better. Right. So that's very interesting. That's something that I think everybody is guilty of, right? Because you'll say, this message can wait, this email can wait, that task can wait, but all this is building up in your mind actually. Right? So close the loops and you will help. Okay. So that's also the other very interesting thing to note. Okay. Yeah. So with that, right? Actually, these are the key things I wanted to go through today. Um, what I will do is that just to highlight to everybody that you all can just look at these Telegram communities here. Do join in if you are and it's regardless of whether you're my Stretcher students or not. These are the places where we'll also be sharing resources for all students, right? Across the different subjects. And this also includes for both PSLE and non-PSLE. So if you have other siblings who are at different levels, they can also join in. But we also be sharing these PSLE related materials here. Okay, so y'all can scan and y'all can join our Telegram communities where we'll be sharing more of these resources. Okay, and so y'all can do a QR code scanning. Then maybe Sweaty, if you are okay, you can help to share the link on the chat also. And then this one here also is a My Stretchers one-stop shop for all our resources. Perhaps just to so if you look at it, this is mystretcher.com links. Actually, this is a one-stop shop where it has the links to all the communities that I talked about just now, and it also has a lot of these upcoming webinars that we are doing. So this is actually the first of many that we are doing in the year. Apart from, I mean, the PSLE is one key part. So if you look at the PSLE journey, we do have a lot more webinars coming up, and you can actually check out all of these at our this resource link itself. So if I just do a quick share so that y'all can take a look at that. So if y'all go to this resource link, you can actually see from there, just give me a minute, uh, this page, right? This page here. So these are all the links where you can, if you go onto the link, you can see uh, the Telegram communities, right? So we have our subject specific ones. We also have one on the PSLE journey. So if you click on it, actually that brings you to a community where we are also sharing resources. We share that across both the subject channels and the PSLE journey channel. So you can be a part of all that. And just to give you a sense of what we do is you can see here, right? So we share things on the different resources that are available, and even like closer to the end of this year, we had all our set one posting exercise and everything, right? So we help our students with choosing secondary schools and all as well. So a lot of resources to really help students along the journey, right? And also, if you look at this here, we have this what we call as a Luma link. So maybe Swati, you can post in the chat also. So if you click on this My Stretcher Luma page, it brings you to all our free webinars that we are doing to support everybody on this journey lah, right, in this year. Because we also do know that the PSLE journey is not an easy one. And we are here to support every step of the way. So many different webinars that we will have, including the upcoming subject-specific PSLE Excellence series also. Okay, yeah. So these are some of the things, just to highlight for everybody. Yeah. Okay. Can. So I'm also going to just share here the templates, right? So for the study plan and all. So meanwhile, you all can just let me know if you all have any questions. So this is the study plan template, the watermark, right? And then this is the goal setting one. Oh, okay. Swai has already said. Yeah, thanks very much for that, Swai. Yeah. Okay. So y'all can also refer to the folder that my colleague has shared, so that y'all can click on that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So with that, I'm just going to pause here to see whether there are any other questions. So okay, let me just look at the chat. Okay. Okay. Okay, what time do I recommend to sleep? I think that really depends on the individual. So I have some students who say they always work on prelim papers until very late, like 12 to 2. I would not recommend that, because actually, if you look at it, I think it depends on the individual. There are people who can survive with just 4 hours of sleep. There are people who needs more sleep, like 7 to 8 hours. I would say most of us are more in the norm. So generally, I think 3 to 4 hours are way too little. And furthermore, because you are still going to school early the next day, definitely I don't recommend, like having too little hours of sleep. So, and I feel that actually, like you see that if you do your study planning well, your scheduling well, I think just working towards a 10 or 10:30, I think that is reasonable actually. I think that you can get enough done, and you will still get enough sleep actually. Okay. Yeah. And then okay, so another parent is asking about catching up on math and science, anything you need to work with when school starts. How does one balance the old and the new topics? Okay, so guys, so I would say one important thing to note. So if you had struggled a bit on your some of the topics from your P5, like what I mentioned, I think it's a good time to stock take and know very well what are the topics that the child is struggling in. Then straight away, I think focus on some of these topical revision and drills for those topics. So for instance, like fractions, percentage, do those revision to make sure that they can at least get all the hollow hanging fruits correct. And it's important to do this earlier rather than later, because you will realize now in P6, right, they are still going to learn the advanced version of it. So they are continuing to learn fractions. And that's why I realized the problem is if they did not have a good foundation from P5, they also struggle in the P6. So you don't want them to like double struggle, where they are not catching up on P5 and they have to learn a new topic. So make sure that you already start on doing that, in fact. Yeah, in fact, right now it's good. Like these few days, I mean, have fun over the holidays and all, but try to take the chance to also practice, right? All these topics. The new topics, I would say, right? Um, the new topics itself, I would say, one tip here is there's no good way around it, but try to learn ahead a bit. So if you are a mind stretcher student, I think that's not an issue, because you do learn ahead here at mind stretcher. But if not, then one way to go about it is, my tip to you is that read the textbook a bit. As in, you don't need to study the whole chapter, but one tip that I can give you is like that. Like for example, for math, just know what are the things that your teacher will cover for this topic, like fractions. So fractions is division of fractions. Then briefly know what is it about. And that's good enough already. Or for science, some of the concepts, maybe you hear for the first time, just know what is it about. So know what your teacher is going to cover and briefly know some of the keywords. Why is that helpful? Is because then when you go to school, when the teacher goes through, it's not alien to you. Then you have a heads up over your other friends and you can learn it faster. Again, it's a muscle memory thing. That means your brain, instead of thinking all are new, I need to get used to it. Now they can say, okay, I can put aside the definition and key terms because I know what they mean. So let's focus more on the deeper concept. Okay, so that's how I will recommend read ahead a little bit so that it's easier for you to pick up on some of the new topics also. Okay. PSLE Bootcamp bundle details are not out yet, but once out, definitely we'll update everybody, right, in all the channels and the community. Do we still have time to play? Definitely. I think it's a balance, right? So I would say that definitely we all work and no play at this point will burn you out. So definitely have more time to rest, to relax. But I also say it's not just about playing. Um, be play strategically, I would say also. So what do I mean by that is if you think of it, right, you take a break and you're playing games, it consumes a lot of your energy, right? And after you play that, you're very tired. You go back to studying, you feel very tired. But what can you do is maybe when you rest, right, you do things like you walk in the park, do a short run, uh, you know, do something, eat some energy snacks. It helps you to build good energy for your next study cycle. So that's how I would think about rest and recharge, but you can do it strategically. Okay? Yeah. 3-year papers. Okay, so that one will be the 3-year series. So popular will have them. You can also check with your schools to see whether the schools sometimes also do get them for the students. So you have to ask them whether they are going to get that also. Okay? Yeah. And yeah, so is it important to complete past year PSLE first before proceeding to prelims? I would say that you can do it concurrently. Yeah, because essentially they are still going to expose you to the same similar trending questions. So it's not to say that you must definitely finish one before starting on the other. Okay? Can? Yeah. Exercise is good. Yeah, so definitely try to exercise more. I think that helps to keep your brain active and functioning. Okay? Can, Okay. Um, yeah, okay, so guys, anyway, right, don't cite me on the 75%. That is more like I'm not trying to prescribe that is 75%, okay? I'm just using it as more like a gauge, okay? But the main point that I'm saying here is that the best students going knowing the bulk of the question. In fact, I myself, because I have done pretty well in the PSLE last time, and the tip that I had, and even working with like the students who really did really well, the tip here is not the going blank, right? Because the tip here is that not maybe it's not 75%, don't be so fixated on 75%, but the bulk of the paper. Once you can master the bulk of the paper, like that means it's muscle memory, just basic muscle memory to you. I have a lot more time to do the more difficult question. That's what I realized because as people struggle with the easy ones, I realized I can straight away go to the very difficult one. I have a lot of time and I have a lot of time to think, correct? And I can tell you the secret is even though I did very well in that subject, I was not like the best in it. I was not like a math Olympiad type of student, but I still did well because I had more time to think on the difficult question because I got through like the 60 or 70% of the easy ones and the straightforward ones easily, and that gives me more time to do the other ones. Okay, yeah, we do not have math or science Olympiad courses right now, but if you join our high achiever programs, our high achiever programs do incorporate more difficult questions to stretch students, right? More challenging questions as well. Okay, yeah, so that's the thing to take. And definitely, like what a parent asked also, definitely. So what we do here is that our mind stretcher courses provides these kind of trending questions to help students. So through our courses, actually you can master the low-hanging fruits. You can be exposed to trending questions. Then you become very familiar. In fact, for our math courses, we have this thing called power codes, where we teach students the right problem-solving strategies to tackle different problem types so that they don't need to start from scratch as well. Yeah, and once you realize that, right? Because a lot of times the students who struggle the most is if they think from scratch. They don't know how to start. Once you don't know how to start, you waste time. But once you know how to start, once you know this is the problem solving strategy, then it's easier for you to save time. I would say for some of the subjects, one of the secret tip is really not secret tip lah. One of the key tip is time management. The more time you save, the more time you have on the more difficult questions. Okay, so that's the other thing. Okay. Can yeah, so I think I managed to get through all the questions. Um, yeah, okay. So if nothing else, then that's all for now. Yes, the subject specific PSLE ones, we will put it up onto the our Luma chats so that y'all can also take a look and see all the sessions that are coming up. It will be up in like the next week or so. Then check those out and do share those also. Okay, and those are again is complimentary for all, so anybody can also attend. So do feel free to also share with your other, you know, friends or families, whoever who's taking PSLE or even others who are interested in this. Okay, Ken. If there's nothing else, then that's all for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And yeah, wish you all the very best of luck as you all kickstart this journey towards the PSLE prep for the year. Okay, yeah, so it will be a interesting journey, but rest assured, we'll also be here together with everybody, right, for this. Okay, thanks, everybody, and we'll see you